Welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today, we're fortunate enough to be joined by Philippe Guichard. He is from D2 Design and Development. Philippe, thanks for joining us.
Welcome, Philip.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, no, it's really good to come on and good to meet you a couple of weeks back and get a bit of an insight of what you're up to. So, love to share that with the audience today a little bit. And it's all about not just software products today, it's about physical products. So, Philippe, you've been involved in product design from a physical perspective, not just a software side at all. So today is more for the audience that's listening in around maybe IoT devices or some sort of physical wearable that you might want to be designing or thinking about. And we thought Philippe could share some of his experience and help you guys out with the process. So Philippe, first question is all about you. How did you get involved in this area? Where did it all start? What drove you into product design?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So how far back shall I go?
Up to you.
As far as the story starts.
Possibly, I think the first trigger for me is when I was a kid. I used to read those comics from, the Donald Duck and everything, and they have one character called Garo Gearloose, I guess, who is a kind of inventor, crazy character that, transform an idea into a physical thing. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And of course, in that context, it's kind of magical, and the machine do your pancakes and your coffee in the morning, and then make your bed. Like it's really all over the place. But I thought that was really a cool idea, that you can take an idea and then work at some kind of mechanism or something, and then at the end you have a product that does a service to you. So I thought, wow, that's really cool. I think that was one of the first trigger. The second trigger is linked to a test I did when I was 16. I wasn't a very good student. I was an okay student. I was more sitting at the back of the classroom and disrupting a bit the
Throwing paper across the room.
the lessons and everything. And fair to say, I was a bit disengaged, which is often the case of the creative and entrepreneur people. They tend to be at the back of the classroom. And my parents had me take a psycho test of some form, or like a career test, and the test came back, and the lady who gave me the test said, okay, I had a very unusual profile, and she couldn't make it any sense of it, so she thought, oh, that guy is dumb. And she said, well, there's no way you can have your baccalaureate. Forget about universities and further study. You're not, wired for that. Best you can do is work with your hands, be a cabinet maker. If you're on the top of your game, maybe you can make a guitar or violin. But that's the best you can do in this life. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's very interesting. But I didn't feel this way. I didn't feel dumb. I feel disengaged and bored, yes, but not dumb. And that was interesting because my profile showed that I have actually different center of interest. So people who were with me, they had two very high interests in math and physics, and that was your path. And I had nearly the same, but I have also very high spikes in art, in grammar, in logic, and different areas that didn't make any sense to that lady. That was important because a couple of years later, I met an industrial designer at a party at I was about to say house, but that was more of a student room, like a tiny thing. And that guy invited me over. He was the CEO of a small industrial design studio. And I was amazed by that. Like, it's like combining creativity and science and psychology and, culture.
Everything in one box, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like, and I was fascinated. It's like, wow, you can do that and you can get paid like it's a job. And I was like, this is fantastic. And the first thing I did when I came back from visiting that studio is dig out that test. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that the test and what was required in design was like nearly a perfect match, and I thought, well, that's probably what I want and need to do. So long story short, I finished my mechanical engineer degree and had another degree on top of that in industrial design. Came back to France at the age of 22, 23, opened my first design studio.
Brilliant. So you started early.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting story.
Yeah, definitely. I find it fascinating, the psych tests that they do to teenagers and what they do. I think mine came back as work outdoors, and I don't do that at all. But I found it interesting. But I do like nature, so it's interesting when you think when you think to that. But when they just throw a test at you and put you in a box, it's yeah, it can be a bit disconnected if people don't understand how to interpret those tests and different ways to think about them. So I think you dug into that yourself, which is good.
Yeah, that was quite the experience. Yeah.
So starting at 22, 23, what was that like? Anthony and I have a little bit of a similar story to you, but we won't go there yet. But yeah,
Yeah.
what was that like?
It's like the story of the young naive entrepreneur that think I'm gonna do something and just give it a
Yes.
go.
Yeah.
And I seriously, I was extremely naive in terms of business and everything, but also I had a couple of insights. The first thing I did is to kind of start a company with a few stakeholders and shareholders, and they were like more mature people. They were, around their 40s and something, and I have a bit of a experience. I had a kind of a advisory board of 5 different entrepreneurs that were giving me a bit of a distance and advice. That was really good. The other thing I realized I didn't know how to sell, and I hired a sales coach just to try to pitch and everything. And then after that, I just went out there. Like I was super naive. I was knocking on doors and said, "Okay, guys, I'm a designer. I have this mechanical engineer background, so I understand things that other don't usually, and I can make it work." And that's how I got my first job. So I got my first job. That was very funny because I started with like zero money, like seriously. So my first job, I said, "Oh yeah, well, in order to confirm the job, I need a deposit from you. So you need to pay 50% up front and everything." And it's not that I needed a deposit. I had zero money. I had
Zero
zero.
money in the bank, yeah.
So with the deposit, I went to buy markers and papers and crayons and stuff like that, and I did the sketches and presented the sketch, and I said, "Well, now that I did the sketch, I can do the CAD, but you need to pay up front." And that allowed me to rent CAD station because I didn't have any. To rent CAD station at night at other engineers that I knew, and I could do the work, and so that's how it started. A bit of bits and pieces, and a bit of grit and a bit of passion, and all those stuff that you do with a lot of naivete. Also, when you're in your 20s.
Brilliant. I'll tell you a bit about our story. I don't think we've shared it on the podcast, Anth. Similar. We started Aerion, which is the core business, when we were 22. I was 22, 23. Anthony, what were you, 22, 23?
Younger than you.
Younger than me.
23, I
Younger.
think.
So maybe 23, 24, whatever it was. I don't even remember.
22.
15,
2008. I'm
15
86
years
or
ago,
more.
yeah. So 22, 23. Same thing. We we weren't as smart as you, though. We didn't get any advisors. We just tried to do it on our own for a long period of time. So we were at uni together at La Trobe in Bundoora, Melbourne.
Yeah.
We were mates. Oh, we weren't as close. I think it was another party that connected us. Who was one of our founders at the time, and he left. We moved him on probably 2 years later. Not even. That was a challenge in itself, but that was a more of a relationship problem than anything. But yeah, similar thing. We knocked on doors that we knew, though. We got access into some educational technology simulation tools that we started building for a Victorian Space Science Education Centre. Anthony did a summer internship with them, and they needed
developing
help.
a product.
So that can be our first client. And La Trobe was one of our first clients building some tech for. So that's how we started. Naive, no idea what we're doing, no money. We brought our own little computers. La Trobe were nice enough to give us a little office in the back of nowhere. So we started working out of there. So everyone brought their own box, no money in the bank. Same story. We knew we couldn't sell, but I think we built a few opportunities off relationships, and it sort of went forward from there. So yeah, similar but slightly different. No advisors though. That was probably one area we could have saved us 5 years.
Well, one of my advisors, I had to, let's say, push him out after a couple of years. There were some financial things that were not quite right, and he was the CEO. Technically, was the CEO of the company.
Yes.
Even though he had small shares, but I discovered this number of irregularities, and I had to buy him out. So, those are stories like, the founder story.
There's always one of those happening. So we had
Exactly.
Heard
co-founders
a
we
lot
had
of
to buy
different
him out.
versions of that.
Sorry, that was back in the day. He didn't fit the mold. He wanted to be the CEO of a business and do nothing. That was the reality. So yeah, it just didn't really work that way when you're three guys trying to get something started.
Yeah.
So yeah, so everyone has those stories though. It's all
Yeah.
about people, relationships, who you're working with.
Yeah.
So you're 22, 23, got
Mm.
your first client, paid up front to help you get moving.
Yeah.
Where did that take you? Obviously, you're in Australia now, so it's obviously taken you to another part of the world. How did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had my business for over 8 years. I grew it to about 6 people and a couple of freelancers that were not really working full time but close. So that wasn't a very big business, but that was a decent business, and we were just doing product design.
Got
So
it.
there were no graphic design and stuff like that. So that was reasonably okay for just a unique product design company. Well, the story was I got lucky, and also I knew that I had skills that were a bit unique, meaning that I was an industrial design with a mechanical engineer background. So the way it translated is that pretty much every sketch or every CAD thing I did, I could deliver from a mass manufacturing perspective. And if I couldn't, I was, talking to engineers or the guys on the floor, and then we were going to figure something out. And I think that gave me a very solid reputation in my region because, yeah, I was in papers with like the biggest studio of the region. Like there were two huge studios in my region, and like when I was 24, something like this, there were a paper. There were like the three photos of the designers, and I was one of them. I like felt a bit like a fraud or something. But but the point is, I was designing a bike. I was 24 or something, which is insane when you think about it. I designed machines and product, like very heavy product and stuff like that, and consumer goods. And so I think I got lucky, but also I could benefit from this mixed experience of being I won't say I'm a very good mechanical engineer, but I have a sense. I cover some of their ground, and at least I can talk to them, and I kind of like it. I like to make sure that I can deliver from the mass manufacturing perspective, and so that gave me an edge from day one.
Got it.
And after that, I I also started to because I was working a lot with founders and CEO and entrepreneurs. Delivering the product is one thing; it's great, but it's not enough. And I started to understand that from the CEO perspective, the founder perspective, it's about growing the business. So you need more than a product. You need good marketing and a good business modeling. So I started to study marketing. I started to look at the finance aspect and probably also a bit the value proposition of the design that I was putting out. And I started to build a framework, and I've been building that framework, which is like behind me now. And there are kind of three legs to it. To simplify it at the high level, the details methodology is a bit more complex, but that's all you need to know. There are kind of three legs to the stool, and if you miss one of the legs, the stool is quite unstable, and you take a lot of risks. So that's kind of the trajectory. And on a personal level, I had to close my business after some unfortunate events with a client, and it's part of the business stories. And after that, I decided that I wanted to leave France to be an entrepreneur elsewhere. And I was ready to move to Canada, strangely enough. And I did all the paperwork, and I was ready to leave and everything. And then I met my wife. And she's Australian. So this is the globe. And I had the choice, and I was supposed to go up there. And I went down here, just on the opposite side. And I've been in Melbourne for the last 11 years. And starting the studio, I can't remember, probably like 8 years ago, something now.
A brilliant story, interesting background, and it's amazing how things can change at the flip of meeting someone that you fall in love with, come to Australia, get married, and it probably changes your landscape completely. In Canada, there's some French-speaking areas which might have been easier for you.
I always find that super funny. There's what you plan and what the universe gives you.
It's always very different.
They rarely align.
You're up for a good laugh, so that's very good. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about, obviously, for our listeners, it's a really good background. Thank you for sharing. I think it's important for people to understand your background, your history, and how you got to where you are today. D2 design, focusing on designing products that actually are viable, that you can actually take to market, build a business around. What is good product design in your mind?
Oh wow, super deep question. To some extent, I think for me the notion of a good design is when the design is invisible. And invisible, I don't mean that you don't see it, but when you experience something, it's a flow, it's natural and everything. And you experience bad design every day, by the way, because there are frictions. There are frictions, frustrations. There are things that are not working well. There are like you have to adapt to your surroundings. And by the way, we do that all the time. Like one of the example I do share in my keynotes or with my students is you're so used to the tap, getting the hot water and the cold water. So you don't even question that it's a horrible concept today. Like it's completely stupid. And if you look back in time, of course, when they started to put water in the houses, you needed something that was reasonably cheap and everything. So you have a screw on the pipe, and that's a tap today. And then we've been designing and making that looking good and nice shapes and everything. But the essence is the same. Like it's and when you think about water consumptions and ergonomics and behavior and everything, today is completely stupid. Like it doesn't make any sense to have that technology. We should have something that is so much better. And that's the type of thing I like to look at. And that's, I like to look at the frustration and the thing that you don't really see. And when you put the new product out there, you're like, oh yeah, that's, it feels more natural.
The old tap there. There's obviously it's been some evolutions with but I think that's more for water consumption when you go into like the public bathrooms and you put your hand in front of this sensor, and that is horrible experience.
Yeah.
I find it terrible. Like you put your hands in front of it, and it doesn't come out. You're moving your hands around,
Exactly.
trying to get the sensor to actually engage. The
Yeah.
experience is terrible. I'd rather just put the screw back on and be much easier for
Yeah.
everyone.
I
That's when I
agree.
saw when I was at Coles. They had the tap where your leg was, so you'd push up against the handle and
Yeah.
you turn the tap on, so you didn't have to touch it with your hands.
Yeah.
Just stayed clean, and your hands stayed clean.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that. That's yeah, that could be more like a better experience. Sometimes it's borderline funny. I went to an airport, I don't know when I was traveling, and you have the soap dispenser that is a sensor one.
Yes.
So if you put your hand, nothing happened. When you leave your hands, the sensor is working, and then the soap is dripping. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And you have this mountain of soap on the on the side of the sink, and it's I don't know. It wasted money. I don't get it. It's we can do better.
Definitely. Yeah. But in terms of someone that's got a concept, because it's all about idea, right? And that's where we sort of start from a software perspective. It's conceptual. So we have a concept, we want to achieve X,
Yeah.
and then how do we design something that's going to get us there? From your perspective, where do people start when they think physical product? Because there's a lot more pieces to the puzzle. It's not just build the technology component,
Yeah.
features, functions. There's obviously a design UX experience, but now it's more we have to be able to actually produce this. We can design
Yeah.
something, but if it costs us $10,000 to produce a product that we can sell for 1,000, we've got a problem. So there's a lot more components to it, and scale doesn't help when the cost is more than what you can sell it for. Whereas in software, scale can sort of get you back some revenue. So it's a slightly different game that you're playing. So how does that dynamic come together, and what would you advise people to when they start thinking about physical product? How
Yeah.
might they begin the thought?
Yeah. So that's I mean we can spend 3 hours just on that. It's that's the really the meat of the thing. But in essence, very often people have an idea, and I want to distinguish the idea from the concept. So an idea is actually already an embodiment of a concept, and some people are not even aware of the concept where the idea came from. So that's very, very interesting. So it's a bit, up there, but that's a distinction that is worth pointing at. So they have an idea. Let's say we were talking about a soap dispenser. So they have an idea of a soap dispenser that have a specific handle that allows you to get the soap. Very often they will go to either a product development agency or try to do that on their own. But like the idea is that they will build a prototype and build some physicality to it. And then if you don't have the experience, then you face, okay, how do we manufacture that thing? And if you don't know all the technology and everything, it becomes like a very heavy burden and everything. But what is interesting is that very often, and that happens very often with, I would say, inventors and first-time entrepreneurs, they are really, really product focused. And they have this idea, they're kind of locked in some ways in the idea, and then they keep pushing and thinking that if they get the product right, that's going to work. And that's one of the reasons why the hardware ventures are that there's a tenfold in failures versus any other ventures. It's not because it's harder. I mean, hardware is a bit harder, that's true. But pretty much very often, all the entrepreneurs being more like technicians, I would say, like technical oriented, they all make the same mistakes. And so the two mistakes that I made at the very early stages are lack of market fit and disregarding the business model. So if I go back to this idea of soap dispenser, so you have an idea of a soap dispenser with a specific handle, that's the idea. The essence, the concept of that is a soap dispenser. And a soap dispenser could be this, but it could be with a sensor, it could be with a different handle, it could be upside down, it could be with pressure, it could be, I don't know, like even on the tap itself, like there are so many options. So all those options are different ideas of the same concept. So that's why when you have an idea, it's good to find an expression, and which means usually you can do some kind of CAD rendering or give it a form and a shape. And then you need to confront that with the market as soon as possible. And that's my highest recommendation. Start talking to your market, see if they have the same problem, see if they see the solution as a good solution, and then you work your way up on product development and business modeling after that. But as soon as you have something, ask the marketplace, and then come back and be able to be flexible. Like if the market says no, it doesn't mean that the concept is bad. I mean, we need soap dispensers, and there are quite a few out there. So you may have to come back to the drawing board or the imagination board and think, okay, that handle didn't work. My idea was a whatever handle, that didn't work. But maybe there's something else. And if you listen to the market, they could give you some kind of insight, or you could look at their behaviors or stuff like that. And then you can come back with idea number 2 based on the same concept.
I think it's sound advice, because I think I agree that everyone, we sort of jump into meeting designing just software product. They sink their teeth into a concept, and their concept is to solve a problem, and here's the idea, and that's the idea they sort of may stick to, and not willing to sort of tweak and budge. And we've seen people spend years building a solution, then put it out to the marketplace, and no one buys, or no one is engaged, and they don't ask the question why, because they probably didn't ask any questions at the beginning. That's generally why. Yeah. So
wrong approach, wrong wording or market recommendation, the way it's worded or presented. Lots of different things.
Oh, there's so many layers on that. And in hardware, that breaks my heart. Like I can't give name, and I don't want to, but I've met a few entrepreneurs in the last year that spend in between 1.5 to at least $2 million on an idea that goes nowhere. Like there's absolutely zero interest. And it really breaks my heart, because one of these entrepreneurs who spent the most money, it's over $2 million.
Oh,
wow. The concept is very good. It's a very solid concept, but his execution, which means the way he executed that in an idea, is completely, it's too hard. Like he's competing with established brands, and he wanted to build another brand, which is, it's not impossible, but it's like the car companies. It's super hard. And there was a tweak to his concept. If you turned his concept into an accessory for other brands, that would have been a complete different story. But he was locked into his ways of thinking, and I don't exactly know where he's today, but he's it's a sad story. Like that really breaks my heart.
And that's to give you a bit of background. Why we started the DevReady podcast in the beginning, we had in 2019 it started. There were 5 founders that came to us. Not as much money, but over $1 million collectively. We worked out in the space of a week. And the first lady in our podcast was Judy Selmans. She spent quite a lump of money trying to build a
$400,000.
A marketing tool, and really got nowhere, and eventually got something out of it, but probably really didn't get a return. She was willing to come on and share a story, and that was our first test pilot. And then we kept going because it was just sure how do we share these stories to help people not make these types of mistakes. And one of the key things is talk to the market as early as you can. And that's pivotal in terms of any product development, whether it's software, hardware, or anything in between.
Assess and evaluate, really. Just get something as quick as you can out to the market and see who's interested. Even if it's just a visual prototype, you don't actually have to have the real thing functioning. Just, is this going to work? Like in the case of hardware, it's, does the shell, is it ergonomic enough for you to hold, or whatever it may be?
And we have tools today, like, and again, I started working 30 years ago. I remember doing a medical product, and the time to prototype and everything was so short that I just I got some, how do you call that? The paste that the kids have, that model thing?
The PVA
or Play-Doh?
Play-Doh,
Play-Doh,
yep.
Mm-hmm. I just went and took some Play-Doh and I did some kind of mock-up with Play-Doh and then put that in the hand of surgeons and just to see how does it feel. There were 3 different shapes. It's like, and we got feedback like that wasn't perfect, but that was good enough. Today we have a number of 3D printers and stuff like that, and we can be a bit more accurate and but there's always a way. Like there's I did plenty of prototype with cardboard and stuff like that just to demonstrate a function or explain to people how a mechanism will work and how that would benefit the end user or stuff like that. So there's always a way that you can prototype. But I agree, as soon as you have an idea, try to put it out there. Sometimes in hardware, because of IP, that can be very tricky.
Okay.
So there are ways to go around that. And one way I can also advise is talk about the problem you solve, which is very funny because when you ask some entrepreneurs, they came out all excited about, we have this new soap dispenser and this is fantastic. It's the next big thing after sliced bread and it's going to be a big hit. And you ask them, what problem do you solve? And say, what do you mean? It's you could say, well, it's about soap dispensing. Or, no, maybe there's something else. And you need to really understand what the problem is. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't really nail that. And you don't have to disclose anything, but if you just talk about, okay, we're trying to solve this problem of, poorly distributing soap in restrooms or whatever, bathrooms. Is that a problem that you're facing when you go to the restaurant and airport and other collective areas? Yes or no? And if yes, what type of experience do you have, and try to nail that. If you just talk about that, that can give you a sense of how the market is and how big the market is. So that's another trick.
Yeah, we have a similar thing. We say we have to solve the problem and not the symptom. Otherwise, you're just treating the symptom and it's never going to go away. It's always there. You're just working around it. So it's always just trying to dive in to the problem behind the problem, generally is the way to word it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting point, though, just to talk to the problem, just to share, to get insight, not share your concept. And I think it's probably protects people a little bit if they're concerned about sharing their ideas too early, because a lot of people are. I feel like they're the only one with your idea. Generally, there's probably another 101 people with the same idea, if not more, given the planet that we're on. And it's about who executes the best in the end, who markets the best, who executes the best, who sells a story the best, sells a vision the best. That's generally who wins the outcome in solving a particular problem.
Yeah, I'm sure between the 3 of us, there's probably several hundred NDAs we've signed.
Yes.
Any of those problems.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, so many. And sometimes it's funny because you sign an NDA, then people pitch their ideas like, duh. How do you Google that? Because I know it's like 10 products that already covering that.
They're brilliant, aren't they?
That's another key thing. Just Googling the concept and seeing if something's available. A lot of people don't even do that.
I know. That's mesmerizing. For me, ideas, they are important because that's the base of, it's not even a foundation. It's like, okay, thinking about the house that you're going to build, but it's all about the execution. It's exactly because I can have an idea of a soap dispenser. You can have an idea of a soap dispenser, but I'm going to execute that in a very different way than you will. And you're going to have two different companies, two different segments for two different markets and everything. So it's extremely rare that you can be, some people steal idea. That definitely happens, but it's not that common because and especially in hardware, it's so hard to put a product out there. Like
I think
unless
the
the
hardness is
gold,
the expense, the investment. I think when people share
It's the
ideas,
domain knowledge,
this-
experience in knowing how to deliver part of that product as well, not just.
Yep. I think when people come and talk to people like us, yes, we sign an NDA. They're concerned that we're going to steal their idea, but we're working on our own business, trying to do our own things, evolve our own components, and we don't even have the time to work on the ideas that we think could actually add some value. if you know what I mean, Philip. So yeah,
I do. I still have people that are very suspicious of designers, thinking they're going to steal and do. It's like I don't care. Like I have my own ideas. If I have 5 minutes, I work on my own stuff. Like not yours. I got zero interest in that.
Yeah.
And I have ideas that I think have a bigger impact, a bigger market than yours. And it's not being disrespectful, but it's like, okay, I have a sense that I could nail this one. So anyway,
in the end, I think you're similar to our thinking. You love the idea, you love helping people get a solution that's actually going to be viable, hit the market, and actually give a return. Can we talk a bit about what's going on behind you? Because I'd love to understand how it all comes together for you. The three-legged stool. So you got two parts. Explain those for us.
Yeah, so that's kind of the technical part here. The technical is just, okay, to design a product, what do you need? Well, you need to effectively design a product. So that's design for function. The example I say, if you need to design a teacup, it has to work like a teacup. Like it's as simple as that. And it sounds simple, but when you really think about it, we are talking about soap dispensers that don't do their job. It's like, well, it's simple, but a lot of products don't even go there. Like it's, you have plenty of product out there that don't really work. Like from, knives that you have and stuff that are sharp enough and not whatever, and don't really do the job well to, my example of the tap or the soap dispenser or you name it, you're going to find them. So it's really trying to find that time and do the necessary iteration and test and prototype to really dive into so that people can have the experience. So it's super important for me that people have a very good experience with your product. But again, the technicalities of the product, that's not enough. So after that, as soon as you have something, could be rendering, could be ideas, sketches sometimes. If you have prototype, that's even better. You engage with your market. Like, my God, it's so important. And especially important in hardware. And I will tell you why. You don't design a product for 1,000 units, 10,000 units, 100,000 units, or 1,000,000 units in the same way. There are different technologies. There are different mold, different investment. So if you think you're going to get away with, a polyurethane mold and everything, because you thought low quantity and suddenly you're booming and you need to deliver 50,000 to your Amazon 3PL in next weeks, you're done. You haven't designed for the right technology, and that's the end of it.
Interesting.
So you really, and that's why you need to really engage with the market. It's not just because you want to talk to the guys, it's just because you need to assess how big is my market. And in hardware, it's super, super important. Like you really need to know, you can design product for a few hundred, that's fine. Like it's more like artisan type of thing. You can scale artisanal, like Louis Vuitton is an expert in doing that, but that's super hard. And it took them like a few decades to do that. So it's not everyone, but it's possible, super hard. But usually you have technology for different level of mass manufacturing. So you need to know with the market fit, you need to what the market wants at what price point and which technology do you place facing that so that you have the best possible outcome. And so that's the second step. The third step is business modeling. And I studied business modeling with just the financial aspect. And you'll be surprised how so many, even businesses, founders and entrepreneurs have no idea about numbers. Like when I say no idea, it's so they will know, for example, the mass manufacturing price, but the cost of acquisition of customer, which channel they're going to use, so very often they don't have an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that at the beginning, and when you start, it's hard. I get that. Like I've been doing that for 30 years. It's hard. But you have an idea for, you have industry benchmark, you have competitors, and you can have a sense like, is the cost of acquisition like 5% or 25% of the retail price, for example?
Makes a big difference, doesn't it? Yes.
Exactly. And if you don't know, you need to, pick a number and try to work your way on. But you can't go blind and say, okay, I think word of mouth will be fine and we'll go with there. And it's so. But business modeling is more than that. It's also working on the value proposition. And that's also linked to marketing/advertising and everything. But it's also linked to the business side. So you need to find what's your unique value proposition, how different are you from the competitors, and which language you're going to communicate in order to deliver that value. And that's super interesting too, because if you do that work, you can really disconnect from the financials, meaning that you can be in a market where people are super happy to pay something for $30 and you have costs that cost you $1 to manufacture, but the value proposition is still linked to the $30 perception. So that could be really, really interesting to work this way around too.
That's a good place to be. Cost $1, but $30 to sell. But if your cost acquisition's $50, there's a problem. So yes, very important to understand that piece. Definitely.
Yeah.
Got it. And then the other side, you got what's triple bottom line. Explain this one to
me. Yeah. So I've been working in product design for 30 years now, and I've always been fascinated by the impact that we have when we design a product. We have an impact on the client, like the company, their client, the end user, and everything, and that's fantastic. But at large, we have an impact on the planet because of the material that we source and the end of life and what we do with them. And we have an impact on people. Like literally the end user is one of them, but there are so many stakeholders that are involved. And the question is for me, how can I add some value to as much as possible, like all the stakeholders that I can see in that project? And it doesn't have to be a social enterprise or anything. It's just like, okay, there could be ways to design a product that benefit from like the extended family that will be involved with that product. So for example, many years ago, I designed a machine, and the machine was really designed for the end user. The particular thing is that machine was sold mainly in Asia, and the end users were very often female workers. And so they are not as tall as I am, for example. So you need to scale down the machine to make sure they are comfortable and the ergonomics are right. But we also discovered that one of the stakeholders was the maintenance people. And the maintenance people, they were not involved with the machine every day. They will come every few weeks or something, and they will have to tweak a number of things. So we designed a machine with a special door, and all the technical components that were tweaked by the maintenance people, all those components were at the front of the machine at the beginning. We put everything at the back so that the user doesn't have to touch anything. So that's a separation. But also the maintenance people, suddenly they just open the door. They have a wall of stuff, that controllers and stuff that they can change. So that's one way to benefit. And then there are plenty of different levels and layers that you can play with. But that's the idea. The idea is to expand a bit, the play.
And understanding who's involved with the product from end to end.
Yeah.
Key stakeholders across every stakeholder, I think, when you're designing product is important to be considered. Because a background story, we built a product for a big corporate, and that's where DevReady sort of came from. DevReady is about helping you design, get better product, involve stakeholders, understand, get really clear on your concept, your idea, what's going to get you to a point where you've got an MVP in front of people to start testing, engaging. So, but we didn't do things that way back in the day. So when there was a corporate client that came to us, I won't name names, but they went through the process. We built the product. We engaged with the stakeholders that were put in front of us. that product got built over the course of 6 8 months. They took it to a conference overseas, presented it, and there was pushback from one department that was actually going to sell this thing. And then what that meant was this became shelfware. It got absolutely nowhere because that stakeholder's not engaged in the beginning, and they pushed back against the product concept because they thought it was going to impede on it was going to impact their current marketplace, what they were doing, how they were operating. So it completely fell over. And the learning is engage every stakeholder and understand who they are, because there could be some stakeholders that can actually block a product moving forward as well.
Yeah, I won't share names and everything, but I have similar stories.
They're interesting insights, and that's something that we learn along the journey, and how to engage all of them. Because you want everyone on side, especially if there's a part of the decision-making process or the buy-in process.
Yeah.
Especially for the buy-in and getting that broader appeal from the users who are actually going to use it, or the ones that have to sell it to the users. That's important.
Yes, very important stuff. So in terms of just that planet side, that can be a number of things, right? So that could be the type of material you use, how the product is dispensed of, how long it lasts, etc. What's some of the thinking in that area? Because it's important, especially with the physical product and plastics. Obviously eating up our ecosystem.
Plastic is a big one, and then there's a lot of greenwashing, so it's super hard, and people have a perception of what's green and it's not, and everything. So that's a tough thing. So after 30 years of working in that field, the only thing I can say that there are no simple solutions. Like it's, all the people that say, oh yeah, just change to bioplastics, like, no, please don't. Like it just doesn't work. So for example, many years ago, we worked on a product, and we considered one of the available bioplastic at the time, which was corn. And so we did a study. We tried to see if corn-based plastic was a good thing, and turns out it's not. And the reason is that when you use corn, it's actually a water-hungry plastic. So you need a lot of water to have a cornfield, and then you transform this corn into plastic, which is fine, and then it's going to be biodegradable and everything, which is good, I guess, depending on the lifespan. Not always very good, but I would say good. But when you look at the impact, like how much water you take from the earth and everything, it's like, even if you don't pay that water, it doesn't make any sense. Like that wasn't a good choice.
Yeah, interesting.
So I see a lot of products saying, oh yeah, well, we use this, whatever, compostable thing, and it's really cool, and it's natural, and I'm like, yeah, is it? Like really, like it's, you look at the broader, like from
end-to-end delivery of the product.
Exactly.
Not just the
really
marketing side.
Yeah, and it's like, and one of the products I've designed a few years ago is this one, a small cable management device called Cable Stop, and I thought about bioplastic and other things, and Cable Stop is made with ABS, and one of the reasons is that I know that with that shell, it's going to last at least 20 years, like no worries. And at the end of the life cycle, there are only two materials on that product, 3 parts, 2 material. And at the end of the life cycle, you just put the ABS back to the plastic chain, and it's very good plastic, can be chopped down and then reused in injection molding. And then the steel, it just go back to steel. So and that was so much better than other bio-based plastic, or more recyclable, or recycled even plastics and everything. And one of the reasons is like I cannot guarantee with a bioplastic or recycled plastic that it's going to perform as well after 20 years. And I'd rather have a product that will last 20 years than 5 that will last less, and that you need to churn over, because that's over whatever 40 years of lifespan, that's the outcome is really not as good. So it's a complex thing. It's no easy.
A lot of it's just the marketing spin to the consumers. As long as it seems good for them, then that's what matters.
Yeah, and it's a sad story, because that's where you got all these big brands jumping, like even Volkswagen, the scandal with the diesel in the US. It's because they put a leaf on the back of a diesel car, thinking, and it's actually kind of software that was managing the exhaust just for the test, and like it's that's where it leads. So that's kind of sad. It's but it's very hard, and there's a lot. I think there's a lot to be said around education of the customer. There's a lot of greenwashing and product that pretend to be green, and when you really dive into it, it's like, well, actually, we're better off with the other things.
The original that it was. Yes, it's a different spin.
I think that was the case with like the first electric car, the Toyota Prius. The amount of waste that was used to create the batteries to get them into the first Priuses was ridiculous compared to how much petrol was used in the lifetime of a vehicle.
Yes, yeah. And there are stuff that's a good question. Like electric vehicles, like you know that the embodied energy to build an electric vehicle today is 4 times the energy to build a traditional vehicle.
Yeah, that's a problem too, isn't it?
Okay.
Yes,
and that's a massive thing. Yeah. So they are, they're like, people say, oh yeah, I can drive a Tesla, I'm green. It's like, well, look at the lakes of pollution in Mongolia. That's where they extract most of the rare earth.
Yes.
In order to do that, you need some chemicals. They don't know how to get rid of the chemicals. So in Mongolia, they created those huge lakes where they dump the chemicals. And that's a ticking bomb because, some things will happen eventually, like a
leak somewhere at some point.
And then we're going to have a huge environmental pollution, and we don't know how to scale that exactly or to treat that properly, or it's not included in the prices, or, so it's, not always very obvious. And I like to look at the whole picture to make sound decisions. So that's the angle.
Yep.
That's good insight for people that are driving electric vehicles or considering buying one. So, yes.
Yeah.
Philippe, if anyone wants to learn, like one of the things you talk about is transforming ideas into $1 million products. And I think people that have a concept that's got a physical component would be well versed to have a conversation with you. How do they find out about you or D2 Design Development? Where would they go?
I think one way to reach is easy. It's on LinkedIn. Very often people approach me there. I have a website that you find the address on LinkedIn too. If you want to know a bit the philosophy or what I do, I have a TEDx talk that is out there too that gives a bit of people, who I am as a person, I would say. And I think that would be a good start to get to know me. And I'm also happy to have a discussion on my website. I have a discovery call button, so you just have to press that, and you have a calendar invitation. You find your time, and I'm always happy to help if I can in any way, shape, or form. So yeah.
And I'll share out all that with the show notes, but d2melbourne.com.au, I believe, is the website to reach out to you and click that discovery call button. But we'll share everything. And even the TED Talk, we'll share it along with the notes for the show notes. So thank you for joining us on DevReady Podcast. I think there's a lot more detail we could go into too. So I think maybe a secondary follow-up could be very useful, Philippe. So I really appreciate your time in coming on today. And let's keep
happy to do the follow-up too, and thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate that too.
No, welcome. Thank you.
No problem. Happy to have you on board, Philippe. Thank you.
Thanks.